Paris is Europe's most exquisite art center, and Paris is the city of lights. Paris is a city synonymous with aviation. Tougan Productions proudly presents the Paris Air Show 1989. The Paris Air Show is the world's foremost aviation and space technology exhibition held biannually at Le Bourget Aerodrome. 1,545 exhibitors from 34 nations gathered here to flaunt the latest developments of the aerospace industry and to negotiate new business. In 455 chalets, the managerial, engineering, and sales staff of the aerospace industry met with both regular and potential customers in search for new markets. 203 aircraft were on static display: military, civil, fighters, interdictors, trainers, big cargo, airliners, commuters, ultralights, helicopters, engines from the most powerful to the minuscule, radars, anti-aircraft missiles. 400,000 people attended during its 10 days, most of them air enthusiasts who watched the daily spectacular flying display. '88 was a good year for the French aerospace industry, with total turnover of $13 billion and with a workforce of 120,000. France ranks third in the world's arms market. Global army reduction and cuts in defense spending, as well as soaring costs of high-tech systems, reflect a new trend. A strong civil sector progress countered declining revenues from the military. The Soviet Union display was linked to the policy of glasnost and perestroika. It was the largest ever, and the Soviets searched for potential exports to generate foreign currency revenue. In the 1989 Paris Air Show, the Soviets meant business. Two MiG-29 versions made their first Le Bourget appearance. The MiG-29UB is a dual-seat combat trainer virtually identical to the single-seat fighter. It is powered by two RD-33 turbofans rated at 8.2 tons thrust each. The infrared tracker operates in conjunction with the radar and the pilot's helmet-mounted sight. Its armament consists of 6 air-to-air missiles and a 30-millimeter cannon. The MiG is priced at an extremely competitive price, around $11 million. On the first day of the show, 37-year-old test pilot Anatoly Kochur took the MiG-29 single-seater through its paces. Pulling vertically straight after takeoff, the MiG completes the loop with a spiral dive. Note that this is not a relaxed stability fly-by-wire aircraft. Another climb. And the tail slide. Speed is gained in a left descending turn. Two consecutive rolls of an average rate. Right-hand turn and a 270 degrees roll to a left turn for the slow speed pass. Height is 550 feet and speed 100 knots. Below minimum controllable single engine speed. In this slow-motion analysis, the MiG is about to end the slow-speed, high angle of attack run. Anatoly lights the afterburners to gain speed. The starboard engine reacts with a brief flash of flame, and dies. With insufficient rudder authority to counteract the asymmetric thrust, the MiG yaw starboard. The nose drops below horizon. Anatoly knows the dreaded moment is imminent. He pulls the red handle of his K-360 ejector seat for the first time in his life and in the worst circumstances. Height is only 330 feet and the attitude 60 degrees nose down. The canopy peels away. A third of a second later, the 650-kilogram thrust rocket blasts the heavy seat and its occupant from the ailing aircraft. The rocket motor burns 1/3 of a second. The seat falls freely 1/3 of a second. Height now is only 150 feet. The drogue chute draws the main chute from its housing. Half a second later, the yeoman's seat separates. The canopy begins to inflate when the MiG hits the grass. The port live engine spits fire. The pilot is 30 feet above ground. Only now the canopy is fully deployed. The MiG explodes in a ball of fire, and Anatoly hits the ground very fast 50 meters away. His ordeal is over. He escaped death miraculously. After the crash, a Soviet delegation gathered at the Israeli Aircraft Industry Pavilion to examine the video footage you have just seen. Headed by the MiG-29 chief designer and senior test pilot, the delegation was welcomed wholeheartedly. The tape was scanned frame by frame. Here, for the first time, a bird was traced to fly close to the MiG. A few days later, the Soviets held a press conference whereby brave Anatoly Krochur gave his account of the accident. His comrades included senior test pilot Valery Minitsky and Vladislav Belyakov, the designer of the Antonov 225, was there too. Anatoly's only visible injury was a black eye. In his opinion, the accident resulted from a foreign object ingestion, probably a bird strike. The Mikoyan team was undeterred. The surviving two-seater, flown by Roman Toskayev, resumed the daily flight demonstrations of the MiG-29. With a maximum takeoff weight of 18 tons and 1,300 knots top speed, the MiG-29 performed flawlessly. There is no doubt that the MiG-29 is an excellent fighter, on a par with its Western counterparts. This time, the MiG landed safely to the applause of the crowd. Two Soviet Sukhoi Su-27 versions made their Western public debut at Le Bourget. This long-range heavy interceptor features wide use of titanium alloy, 4-channel fly-by-wire system, and twin 12.5 tons thrust AL-31F turbofans. Maneuverability of this 22.5-ton aircraft has left Western observers with no doubt that the Su-27 is a formidable and awesome fighter. The single-seater can speed up to Mach 2.35, pull 9G turns, and fly downrange 2,000 nautical miles unrefueled. Senior test pilot Viktor Pugachev stunned his onlookers with a novel maneuver of dynamic deceleration. The Su-27 enters this maneuver at about 250 knots. Pugachev applies full aft stick and manually overrides the electric pitch limiter. The aircraft increases angle of attack instantaneously past 110 degrees into an accelerated 3 to 4G stall. Speed is bled to about 50 knots in 3 seconds. Now full forward stick. The aircraft, aided by the 2 huge fins, recovers with full control and no significant height loss. Misfortune befell this time on young Yevgeny Frolov piloting his sizzling twin-seater into a thunderstorm. A lightning strike temporarily knocked out some electric systems. Frolov resumed his display safely but landed tail heavy. But no damage was found. Glasnost was evident when the Su-27 pilots turned up unexpectedly at the General Dynamics Chalet. Test pilots Steve Barter and Bland Smith treated their colleagues, the great Viktor Pugachev and Yevgeny Frolov, to the F-16C.
During the climb, we lift off at 150 knots, get up into the vertical at about 160 or 70, and we'll hold that speed going up. We could go up much higher than we do, but we choose to pull down at approximately 2,000 feet and do a vertical loop. We do this loop and then immediately pull back up into the vertical the second time and hold that for just a short while and then pull down to the horizon. As the nose of the aircraft comes to the horizon, the pilot will put the stick full aft and full left, causing the airplane to go into a very tight roll and spiral down towards the ground. Out of the spiral, we pull up to gain altitude for a split S, pull up 60 degrees of pitch and top out at about 3,000 feet, do the split S and afterburner from about 300 knots, down to 500 feet and about 300 knots. And as we level out, we roll inverted for a negative G, or a 1G pass, level flight, for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then we push up to the limit of the aircraft, which is a minus 3 to 3.2 Gs, push up to about 60 degrees of pitch, and then roll, do kind of a 270-degree roll, and start another split S back towards the crowd. After we come out of that maneuver, we come across show center at 500 feet and about approximately 400 knots, plug in the afterburner and start a pitch back to the right for approximately 120 degrees, and then we do a very quick reversal back to the left. During this climb, we get up to 9 Gs during the pull. At that time, we continue to turn in towards the crowd, do a little bit of a roll. This is probably one of our duller maneuvers during the show, but you can't have spectacular maneuvers all the time. So we point at the crowd, do an aileron roll, just to give them a different perspective on the aircraft, and then pull off in a big barrel roll type maneuver to gain spacing so that we can slow down for the next pass, which is a slow speed pass. Slow speed pass is done down to 110 knots, plus or minus a little. We are just about on the angle of attack limit, but the power setting is really fairly minimal to maintain that airspeed. But with the high thrust to weight ratio, we can climb right out of that slow speed and go right to the vertical, which very few other airplanes can do. We climb out of the slow speed pass to a vertical climb again at about 150 knots. At the top of the maneuver, we roll 90 degrees and then do a max performance pull down to level flight. That then sets us up for the final maneuver, which is the 360-degree turn, and then the vertical climb at the end. And this is one maneuver in the show that we feel like we don't have any competition in. We can go into this maneuver at about 400 knots with the afterburner going and make a very tight turn, 9G turn, very tight and very quick, and still have plenty of energy left at the end of that turn to make a very hard pull into the vertical and go up with several spirals at the top. That pretty much finishes the show. We come back around and make a normal landing, and that's it. Is there an angle of attack limiter in the airplane? Pitch angle of attack limiter?
Эксплуатационное ограничение у нас есть система ограничения угла. Вот сюда.
Do we find something now, sir?
I'm sorry?
You don't have to go to
The McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornet is a high-performance seaborne or landborne tactical fighter. Powered by two General Electric F404 turbofans, the FA-18 is in the better than one thrust to weight ratio category. 1,100 copies of this rather expensive fighter were ordered by 5 operators. The FA-18 is a very agile aircraft at both ends of the speed regime, 90 knots to well over Mach 1.8. It has a combat radius of 600 nautical miles, and it can carry 7.5 tons of external ordnance, including 4 air-to-air missiles. The Mirage 2000 DE is a single-seat air superiority fighter. Powered by a single SNECMA M53 P2 turbofan, the 10-ton aircraft is highly maneuverable, capable of pulling 9 Gs and rolling 280 degrees per second at any speed, any angle of attack. Test pilot Chenevier, aided by fly-by-wire systems, stole the show when he pulled his aircraft into the tail slide. Over 400 aircraft of this type were ordered by 7 different air forces. The Rafale A is a technology demonstrator designed to explore state-of-the-art technologies applicable to a French requirement for a tactical and naval fighter in the 90s. At a cost of $21 billion, the Rafale program is a controversial issue, yet France is resolute in going it alone. Dassault Chief Test Pilot Guy Mito-Murat is at the controls of the sleek Rafale. Two General Electric F404 turbofans yet to be replaced with Snecma M88, coupled with digital fly-by-wire and advanced structure of exotic alloys, as well as composites, enable the 10-ton Rafale to be flown with virtually no limitations. "20 years after being introduced into operational service, the British Aerospace Harrier remains the West's only fixed-wing V-stall strike fighter and a joy to watch. This is the Harrier GR Mark V, which replaces the GR Mark III, boasting twice the range, double the payload, plus new wing and improved avionics. At Le Bourget in 1989, a service aircraft is piloted by squadron leader Andy Gollage. Among its foreign clients are the U.S. Marines, the Spanish Navy, and now Italy. It is worthwhile to remember that the Harrier is relatively inexpensive to produce, easy to fly, and it is combat proven. The technology behind this aeroplane is 30 years old. Still nothing but nothing outflies the American Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest and highest flying aircraft in the world. It cruises normally at 80,000 feet, doing 1,700 knots. Its multi-sensor reconnaissance pack surveys 100,000 square miles of the Earth's surface in a 1-hour flight. The 65-ton Sinister Blackbird is powered by two J-58 turbojets rated at 15 tons thrust each. It is the U.S. Air Force spy plane's first visit to the Paris Air Show. It is also the last. Next year, the SR-71 is due for retirement. The AMX has been developed jointly by Italy and Brazil to a requirement for 300 battlefield support and light attack aircraft. Powered by a single non-afterburner Rolls-Royce Spey, the AMX carries up to 4 tons external load. Piloting the AMX for Aeritalia is a very experienced test pilot, Colonel Napoleon Broganolo, demonstrating the high maneuverability of the AMX, particularly in the roll plane. Evolved from the two-seat trainer, the British Aerospace Hawk 200 is a single-seat, multi-role light fighter. Powered by a single Rolls-Royce Turbomeca Adur turbofan, the Hawk 200 can carry 3.5 tons of external ordnance. The aircraft is piloted expertly by Philip Dye. Customers of the diminutive Hawk 200 are Saudi Arabia and Oman. On static display was the Panavia Tornado air defense variant for the RAF. The Soviet Sukhoi Su-25 ground attack aircraft made its first Paris debut, and it was for sale. Sweden's JAS 39 Gripen prototype crashed early this year, so at Le Bourget only a mock-up was on display. China's F-82 was making its first public appearance at the 1989 show, yours for only $3 million. The Superintendard, meant to be the mainstay of the French Navy for ground support missions up to the year 2005. And the Dassault Atlantique II, a modernized version of an old long-range maritime patrol and anti-submarine aircraft. The Marsh Aviation S-2 bomber concludes the flying display of the first echelon combat aircraft. The peaceful civil bomber carries 8 tons of warload against fire. The Bell Boeing V-22 Osprey tactical tilt-rotor aircraft was not displayed at Le Bourget in 1989. It is fighting for its budgetary life. The consensus at the Bell Boeing consortium is that the tilt-rotor aircraft will progressively replace helicopters. It flies twice as fast, consuming fuel at the same rate. Powered by 2 Allison T-406, rated at 6,150 shaft horsepower each, the V-22 takes off vertically, loaded with 5 tons of cargo, and cruises at 270 knots to a range of 1,000 nautical miles. Helicopter display was somewhat restricted this year. Britain, Italy, Germany, and the USA took no part in the flying display, leaving only the Soviets to compete with the French. Yet what was lacking in quantity was abound in style. The 1989 vintage of all Aerospatiale helicopters was unveiled at the Paris Air Show. After several lean years, Aerospatiale saw an increase in orders to $6 billion, and the backlog had risen to nearly $10 billion, due in large measure to a rise in the civil sector. McDonnell Douglas Helicopter Corporation is at Le Bourget this year with 2 AH-64 Apache operational combat helicopters. It is the target of interest in particular from the Netherlands, Britain, Spain, South Korea, Japan, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. Israel is its first export. The $13 to $15 million gunship carries 16 Hellfire laser-guided anti-tank missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, and a 30mm cannon. The Paris Air Show was the first public appearance of the Soviet Mi-28 Havoc anti-tank helicopter. Still in the evaluation phase, the Havoc is powered by a pair of Isotov turboshafts, rated 2,200 shaft horsepower each. Its maximum speed is 160 knots, and it can carry 2.4 tons of payload, including unguided rockets, guided missiles, and a heavy 30mm anti-tank gun. The nose contains low light and thermal TV, FLIR, and laser designator. Infrared suppression is achieved by downward deflecting ducts. Cockpit armoring is extensive, albeit restricting view. With a takeoff weight of 10.5 tons and a length of 17 meters, the M28 will be the dreadnought of the 90s. The West German BO-105 production is very much geared to the international market. The BO-105 light utility helicopter is well established with nearly 1,300 in service. Here on static display, its anti-tank hot missiles armed version was presented. The BO-105 enjoys a good reputation of being a very nimble helicopter. The UK plane maker Westland presented the Sikorsky U-860 Black Hawk assault helicopter in its gunship configuration. 25 helicopters of this type are on order by the U.S. Army, Britain, and Saudi Arabia. Military helicopters sometimes dwarf their civil brothers. 2001 Robinson R-228 has been delivered here at Le Bourget. This is a two-seat high-speed light helicopter outfitted with a Lycoming O-320 engine rated at 160 horsepower.
The OH-58D Scout is built to go out in the battlefield and find targets for the rest of the armed forces. As you can see on top, we have an optical system mounted on top of the rotor, which has a television for daytime viewing, a thermal imaging system, or a TIS, for nighttime viewing. With the laser and the inertial navigation system on board, you can pinpoint the location of any enemy that you find, pass the target coordinates back to the rear to the artillery or to any supporting aircraft. Whenever they've fired their munitions, if it's a laser-seeking munition, then you can actually guide the bomb into the target with the laser on top in the mass-mounted sight system. Okay, what you saw on the screen was me operating the mouse-mounted sight on top of the aircraft from a thumb button on the co-pilot stick right here. And as I press upwards, left, right, or down, the sight will track the pressure of my thumb on the button. I can change the field of view or the magnification with a switch. I can change from television to the night system with this switch. I can lock in and track one with the thumb switch here. The pilot can change his screens while he's flying the aircraft. If you'll see, the screen over there has his flight displays, has a map display, a flight plan, radio preset frequencies, and if the mass-mounted sight were on, he could choose the mass-mounted sight picture, all without having to take his hands off the cyclic stick while he's flying the aircraft.
Aerospatiale presented the AS-332 Super Puma Mark II. It significantly differs from its predecessors. The Orchidee is a hill-borne battlefield surveillance radar proving real-time intelligence to a friendly armed force. 300 Super Pumas were ordered by 34 different nations. The Aerospatiale Ecurail light utility helicopter is manufactured in a single or twin-engine civil and military version. 1,900 Ecurails were ordered by 45 different countries. The SA-365K Panther tactical transport helicopter is the flagship of Aerospatiale, with Brazil as its first foreign customer. Rotors capable of withstanding negative G are relatively new, so for the first time ever, helicopter aerobatics was permitted at Le Bourget, and Aerospatiale's test pilot, Captain Herrenschmidt, grabbed the opportunity. Regularly, the most prolific type of airplane at the Paris Salon is the fixed-wing trainer. 12 nations presented no fewer than 28 types, 6 of them for the first time. The military count was a dozen, some with dual roles as both trainer and light interdictor. With the upcoming requirements from several nations wanting to replace their aging primary, basic, or advanced training fleets, the competition is indeed stiff. The U.S. Air Force, intent to replace its veteran T-37 in the late 1990s, could require as many as 500 new trainers and a total purchase to the order of $4 billion. Lesser in scale is the Israeli Air Force, now closely examining various candidates fulfilling an elusive requirement for its legendary handcrafted pilots. Making its world premiere at the Paris Air Show is the Jaffe SA-32T, a new side-by-side military trainer from the USA. The prototype was flown for the first time only a week before the show. Carl Poscarel is putting the Allison-powered SA-32T through its paces. Finland presented the Valmet L90 TP Redigo side-by-side primary basic trainer powered by the same Allison power plant. 10 were ordered by Finland. The Redigo is fully aerobatic and can pull plus 7G and minus 3.5G. Its cruising speed is 160 knots, and as a light strike aircraft, it can carry 300 kilograms of external load. The German MBB fan trainer, a tandem 2-seat primary basic trainer, is like the Redigo and the SA-32. It is powered by the same Allison 250 turboshaft featuring the innovative 5-bladed ducted fan. 47 fan trainers are in service with the Royal Thai Air Force. Flying the FT-600 is Kalthoff. At a top speed of 230 knots, the aircraft is a whispering, docile trainer. The Embraer Shorts Tucano is an unprecedented commercial success. At a unit price between $1.5 to $2 million and an operating cost of $150 to $200 per hour, over 630 are in service with 12 air forces. Powered by 750 or 1100 shaft power turboprop, the Tucano is overpowered to be able to perform long prop hanging torque rolls, unlimited inverted flight, and negative G horizontal and vertical loops. The Tucano metal airframe guaranteed life expectancy of some 7,000 hours is by no means a good formula. Powered by 950 shaft horsepower turboprop, the tandem 2-seat basic advanced trainer, the latest PC-9 from Switzerland, enjoys 140 copies ordered by 5 air forces. Flown by Gali, the PC-9 has a top speed of 270 knots and its maximum range is 950 nautical miles. The Marmand Microjet 200B is a side-by-side primary jet trainer. Powered by 2 small turbojets, the aircraft consumes only 200 liters of fuel while speeding 250 knots and maneuvering at plus 7G, minus 3.5G. With a takeoff weight of 1 ton, this is probably one of the smallest jet aircraft in the world, spanning only 7.5 meters. Flown here by Marzialetti, the Fama IA-63 Pampa from Argentina is a tandem 2-seat basic advanced jet trainer powered by a single 1.5 tons thrust Garrett TFE 371 turbofan. This is a 4-ton aircraft flying as fast as 440 knots, armed with a 30mm cannon, and it can take 1 ton of external ordnance. 67 Pampas were ordered by the Argentine Air Force. The Dassault Dormé Alpha Jet is an old thunder in the skies of Le Bourget and a huge success, albeit its price. Over 520 were ordered by the Air Force of 10 nations. Exhibited for the first time at Le Bourget is the 2-seat advanced trainer Sukhoi Su-25UT from the Soviet Union, painted tricolor to pay tribute to the French 200th anniversary. Identical to the standard ground support Su-25 except for the rear cockpit, the Su-25UT can pull up to 6.5 G-turns. Test pilot Zoe demonstrated almost textbook clean aerobatics at a constant speed of 300 knots. The adaptation of the Su-25 into a training role is a good choice, since it has been known to be an exceedingly reliable and immensely strong aircraft. A pair of crocodile wingtip air brakes and parachutes bring down landing roll to 400 meters. In comparison with the small jet, the turboprop is much more efficient on routes under 500 nautical miles. The Casa Nortanio CN-235 co-production between Spain and Indonesia was designed to minimize turnaround time, thus the separate rear loading and passenger doors. It can take up to 44 passengers or 14 tons of payload to a range of 450 nautical miles, cruising at 240 knots. Long been reputed to be a very reliable commuter, the Dormier DO-228 carries 19 passengers and is at the top of its class. Powered by two 700 shaft horsepower turboprops, its cruising speed is 230 knots and its range is 600 nautical miles. For $3.7 million, the first production Beechcraft 2000 Starship was delivered here at the show. Officials are quoting 40 orders for the twin-engine, all-composite variable sweep canard aircraft. No less innovative in configuration is the $4 million Piaggio P180 Avanti, an 8-seat, 400 knots business aircraft. This prototype has logged almost 1,000 hours in flight tests. A bird of a different breed is the Claudius Dormier Sea Star, a twin turboprop 12-seat amphibian. Priced at about $2.25 million, the Sea Star is believed to win a major share of a market demand for 500 amphibians over the next decade. So far, it has over 30 orders. The ATR-42 is a new generation of turboprop commuter co-produced by Aerospatiale from France and Air Italia from Italy. A stretched version, the ATR-72, is a more powerful one. It can carry up to 74 passengers at 280 knots to a distance of 2,300 nautical miles. The Fokker 50 continues to be a worldwide success, with 125 aircraft on order and 50 in service. Winning top score in quietness and 360 book orders, the Fokker 100 is a very successful 100-seat commercial transport. The flight demonstration of the British Aerospace 146 STA was nothing short of spectacular. Peter Sedgwick has put the $23 million military tactical transport into tight turns and slow passes that astounded every fighter pilot. Powered by 4 Lycoming turbofans, the 146 STA carries 60 troops or 10 tons of payload at a cruising speed of 400 knots to a range of 1,100 nautical miles. The Airbus consortium has now broken through the 1,000 form order for this $35 to $40 million commercial transport. Test pilot Pierre Baud is aided with a fly-by-wire system. The first of its kind in a transport aircraft, shows the margins of handling and safety. Northwest Airlines got its first A320 at the Paris Air Show, and it happened to be the 500th Airbus delivered. The Soviet Union's fantastic 6-engine giant transport AN-225 is the world's biggest and one of a kind. With only 100 hours of flight, the aircraft holds no less than 120 international records. The Pitts S2B was here for the first time. The French artist Lady Arix used the CAP-230 to paint Icarus. 2 meteorological research aircraft were exposed for the first time at Le Bourget. The nose of this Fairchild 226 Merlin IV could make even Cyrano de Bergerac green with envy. And the Saab TP-88, an airborne early warning outfit mounted atop Metro 3. The Israeli Aircraft Industry Pavilion was, as usual, a public attraction, particularly since Israel has joined the exclusive club of satellite launchers. The IAI and its affiliates presented combat-proven air-to-air missiles, laser-guided bombs, the only operational Western helmet-mounted gun sight, and a combat tactics trainer simulator suitable even at squadron level. Togan Productions is grateful for having your company on our tour of the Paris Air Show 1989.